Elara's hand locked in Julian's, her smile bright enough to melt Swiss snow. Her whisper cut ice. "Step on my heel again, I'll end you." Julian leaned close, lips brushing her ear. "You need this contract more than I do, Vance." They were the power couple. Brilliant, in love, unstoppable. The truth? They'd rather drown each other in Lake Geneva. But Meyer Holdings only signed with partners who valued family, love. So here they were, corporate sharks pretending to be lovebirds, trapped in a luxury resort with one bed and a blizzard that wouldn't quit. Mr. Meyer raised his glass. "To true love, the kind that survives anything." Julian's eyes met Elara's. Something flickered, something dangerous. How long could they fake it before it became real? "That's the most idiotic strategy I've heard all week." Elara's voice sliced through the conference room like a scalpel through silk. Julian didn't even look up from his tablet. Coming from someone whose last campaign tanked our Q3 projections, that's rich. The air crackled. 6 other executives shifted in their seats, eyes darting between the two like spectators at a particularly vicious tennis match. Elara's fingers tightened around her pen until her knuckles went white. She'd worked 70-hour weeks to claw her way to director of strategy. She wasn't about to let some smug creative director with a god complex undermine her in front of senior leadership. "My campaign didn't tank anything," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Your team's execution was sloppy. You prioritized aesthetics over conversion rates. And you prioritized spreadsheets over soul." Julian finally met her gaze. His eyes were storm gray, sharp enough to cut. "But sure, let's strip all the humanity out of our brand. I'm sure customers will love feeling like transactions." Elara stood. The room went silent. She gathered her portfolio with mechanical precision, each movement a study in controlled fury. "I have actual work to do. Unlike some people who think pretty pictures count as strategy." She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her. Quiet, almost amused. "Run the numbers, Vance. My pretty pictures drove a 23% increase in brand recall. Your data should show that, if you bothered to look past your own ego." Elara's hand froze on the doorknob. She turned, slowly, and their eyes locked across the polished mahogany table. Something electric passed between them. Hatred. Respect. She couldn't quite tell the difference anymore. "Next time you want to play with numbers," she said softly, "make sure you're ready to drown in them." The door closed behind her with a whisper that felt like thunder. The corner office smelled like leather and expensive coffee. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, but Elara barely registered the view. She was too busy trying to understand why Victoria Chen, their CEO, had just summoned both her and Julian to a meeting that felt more like a hostage negotiation. Victoria's fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Meyer Holdings, Switzerland, 3 days. You're both going." Elara's stomach dropped. "Together? Is there a problem?" Victoria's eyebrow arched with the precision of someone who'd built an empire on reading people. Julian leaned back in his chair, all casual arrogance. "Depends. Is Elara planning to push me off an Alp?" "Only if the opportunity presents itself," Elara muttered. Victoria didn't smile. That was never a good sign. "Here's the situation. Meyer Holdings is our largest potential client, €60 million contract. They're traditional, family-owned for 5 generations. And during our last video call, I may have mentioned that our company values are reflected in our leadership team." May have mentioned? Julian's casual demeanor slipped. "Just a fraction. I told them our top strategist and creative director were a couple." Victoria's words landed like stones in still water. "A power couple who embodied everything Meyer values: partnership, collaboration, commitment." The silence that followed could have suffocated empires. Elara found her voice first. "You told them we were dating." I told them you were engaged. We're what? Julian's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. Victoria's expression didn't change. Sit down, Thorne. Both of you, listen very carefully. Meyer's patriarch, Friedrich Meyer, lost his wife 2 years ago. Since then, he's made every business decision through one lens. Does this partnership reflect the values that made his marriage and his company successful? Trust, loyalty, love. He won't sign with anyone he doesn't believe embodies those principles. Elara's mind raced through scenarios, exit strategies, ways to salvage this nightmare. So we tell him the truth, apologize for the miscommunication, and lose the contract, and trigger the clause in our investment agreement that requires us to hit revenue targets this quarter, which means layoffs, starting with this department. Victoria's gaze pinned them both. 23 people lose their jobs, including you two. The weight of that settled like snow in Elara's chest. Cold, suffocating. Julian's voice came out rougher than usual. What exactly are you asking us to do? 3 days, one resort, play the part, sign the contract, come home. Victoria slid 2 leather folders across her desk. Your flight leaves in 4 hours. Meyer's sending a car to take you both directly to Zermatt. You'll stay at their private resort, join them for meals, and convince them that you're exactly what I said you were. Elara stared at the folder like it might bite her. This is insane. This is business. Victoria's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. And you're both excellent at your jobs, so do them, together, for once. Elara yanked her seatbelt tighter as the plane hit another pocket of turbulence. Across the aisle in their business-class cocoon, Julian looked infuriatingly comfortable, whiskey in hand, reading glasses perched on his nose as he scrolled to his tablet. She'd spent the first hour of the flight ignoring him. That strategy was failing. We need rules, she said abruptly. Julian glanced up, one eyebrow raised. I'm sorry, did you just speak to me voluntarily? Should I alert the press? I'm serious, Thorne. If we're doing this, and apparently we are, we need boundaries. Boundaries? He set down his tablet with infuriating slowness. In a fake relationship, how very on brand for you. Elara ignored the jab. She pulled out her phone, opened a new note, and started typing. Rule 1. No unnecessary physical contact. Hand-holding when required. Nothing more. You think Meyer's going to believe we're engaged if we flinch every time we touch each other? I don't flinch. You flinched in the car when my knee bumped yours. She had. Damn him for noticing. Fine, minimal, necessary contact. Convincing, but controlled. Julian took a slow sip of his whiskey. Rule 2. No personal questions. We stick to the cover story. We don't actually get to know each other. Something about the way he said it stung. Elara told herself it was just her ego. Agreed. Rule 3. What happens in Switzerland stays in Switzerland. The second we land back home, this never happened. Like Vegas, but with more chocolate and fewer slot machines. Rule 4. Elara paused. This one was harder to articulate. We don't tell anyone the truth. Not our teams, not friends. No one can know this is fake. Julian's expression shifted. For just a moment, something that looked almost like understanding crossed his face. Because if it gets out, we both look like frauds. Exactly. He lifted his glass in a mock toast. To mutually assured destruction, my favorite kind of partnership. The plane dipped again. Elara's stomach lurched. She hated flying, hated feeling out of control, hated that Julian was watching her with those 2 perceptive eyes. You're gripping the armrest, he observed. I'm fine. You've been fine for the last hour. Your knuckles are white. I said I'm fine. Julian stood. Before she could protest, he'd crossed the aisle and dropped into the empty seat beside her. His proximity sent her nervous system into alert mode. What are you doing? Convincing practice, he said lightly. Fiancés comfort each other during turbulence. It's basically in the handbook. There's no handbook for fake relationships. Then we're writing it as we go. He didn't touch her, just sat there, solid and infuriatingly calm, until her death grip on the armrest loosened, just slightly. Elara stared straight ahead. This doesn't change anything. Wouldn't dream of it, Vance. But his voice held something new, something almost gentle. The plane steadied. Julian stayed where he was. Elara had seen pictures of Zermatt. Nothing prepared her for the reality. The town clung to the mountainside like a jewel box someone had dropped and forgotten. Chalets with dark timber frames and snow-heavy roofs lined narrow streets. The Matterhorn loomed in the distance, sharp and impossible against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Everything smelled like pine and wood smoke, and cold so pure it could strip away lies. She thought, I could disappear here, become someone else. Then Julian's hand found the small of her back as they exited the car, and reality snapped back into focus. They were here to perform, to sell a version of themselves that didn't exist. 3 days of playing pretend in paradise. Breathtaking, isn't it? Their driver, a local man named Klaus, gestured toward the peaks. Meyer family has owned the resort for 40 years. Very private, very exclusive. Elara barely heard him. She was too busy noticing how Julian's touch felt different here. Less hostile, almost protective. It made no sense. They'd been enemies for 2 years. Geography shouldn't change that. But something in the air here felt different, thinner, like the altitude was stripping away the armor she'd worn so long she'd forgotten what her actual skin felt like. Miss Vance? Klaus held open the hotel entrance. She stepped forward. Julian's hand fell away. The cold rushed in to fill the space. The resort lobby was all honey-colored wood and river stone. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to stand in. Leather chairs clustered around low tables. Windows framed the mountains like living paintings. It was aggressively romantic. The kind of place people came to fall in love, or remember why they already had. Elara felt wildly out of place. Mr. Thorne, Miss Vance. A woman in an elegant navy suit approached with the kind of smile that suggested she knew all your secrets and found them charming. I'm Heidi, the resort manager. Welcome. Mr. Meyer is so looking forward to meeting you both properly tomorrow. Tonight, please rest. You've had a long journey. Thank you, Julian said smoothly. He'd slipped into charm mode the way other people slipped into comfortable shoes. We're grateful for the hospitality. Heidi's smile widened. Of course. Now let me show you to your suite. Suite. Singular. Elara's heart picked up speed. They followed Heidi through corridors lined with black and white photographs of the Matterhorn in different seasons. Up a private staircase, down another hall. Finally, Heidi stopped at a heavy wooden door and produced an actual key. Not a card, but an ornate brass key that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. The presidential suite, Heidi announced. Our finest accommodation. I hope you'll find it comfortable. She opened the door. The suite was stunning. Cathedral ceilings with exposed beams. More windows offering impossible views. A living area with plush furniture arranged around another fireplace. A dining table. A kitchenette. Everything screamed luxury. And in the center of the bedroom area, visible through an archway, one massive bed. One bed, king-sized, piled with white linens that looked like clouds, framed by the kind of mountain views that belonged on postcards. One bed. Elara stared at it like it might suddenly multiply. Behind her, she heard Julian tip Heidi and close the door with a quiet click that sounded like a prison cell locking. So, he said, his voice carried that dangerous amusement again. This is cozy. Elara spun to face him. There has to be another room, a couch, something. There's a couch. Julian gestured to the living area. Leather, probably comfortable, about 5.5 feet long. He was 6'2", she was 5'8". Neither of them would fit. "I'll call down," Elara said, already pulling out her phone. "Request a different suite, separate rooms." "And tell them what, exactly?" Julian dropped his bag and shrugged off his coat. He looked infuriatingly at home already. "That engaged couples prefer separate accommodations? That'll really sell the love story." Elara wanted to argue. Couldn't. "Fine, you take the couch." "Why do I take the couch?" "Because you're taller. You'll be uncomfortable anyway." Flawless logic. Julian crossed to the window, hands in his pockets. The fading sunlight caught his profile. Sharp jaw, straight nose, the kind of face that probably made things too easy for him. "Or, hear me out, we could act like adults and share the bed." "Absolutely not. It's massive, Vance. We could fit 3 people in there and still not touch." "Not happening." Julian turned. The amusement had faded from his expression. "You really hate me that much?" The question caught her off guard. Not the words, the tone, like he actually wanted to know the answer. "I don't," Elara faltered. "I don't hate you." "Could have fooled me. You're arrogant, dismissive. You treat strategy like it's optional decoration. And you treat creativity like it's a weakness. You've never once acknowledged that my work has value beyond pretty pictures." His voice stayed level. That somehow made it worse. "We've been on the same team for 2 years. You've never asked about my process, never tried to understand what I do, just criticized it." Elara opened her mouth, closed it, because he was right. And she hated that he was right. "This doesn't have to be miserable," Julian continued. "We're stuck here. We have a job to do. Can we at least try not to kill each other?" The fire crackled. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, silent. "Ceasefire?" Elara heard herself say. "Ceasefire." Julian held out his hand. She looked at it, thought about rules and boundaries and all the walls she'd built. Then she crossed the room and shook his hand. His palm was warm, calloused in unexpected places. He held on a beat longer than necessary. "For the record," he said quietly, "I'll take the couch, you take the bed." "Julian, company policy, ladies first, even fake fiancés." He smiled. It wasn't his usual smirk. It was something softer, almost genuine. Elara didn't know what to do with that, so she nodded and retreated to unpack, her hand still tingling where he'd touched it. The restaurant occupied the resort's top floor. Candlelight danced across white tablecloths. The Matterhorn glowed purple-pink in the dying light, visible through windows that made up the entire south wall. It was aggressively, almost offensively romantic. Elara smoothed her dress, simple black, the kind of thing that worked for any business dinner, and tried not to think about how Julian's hand rested at the small of her back as they approached the table where Friedrich Meyer and his daughter Greta already waited. "Ah!" Friedrich rose. He was 70 if he was a day, with a face like weathered granite and eyes sharp as cut glass. "The famous couple, please, sit, sit." Greta Meyer was elegant in her 50s, with silver threading through dark hair pulled into a chignon. Her smile was warm, her gaze was calculating. "We've heard so much about you both. Victoria spoke very highly of your partnership." The way she said partnership suggested she knew exactly what she was looking for. Evidence, proof, anything that didn't add up. Julian pulled out Elara's chair. His hand brushed her shoulder as she sat. Not an accident, deliberate. The touch sent electricity down her spine that she absolutely refused to analyze. "We're honored to be here," Julian said as he took his own seat. His thigh pressed against hers under the table. She didn't move away. Couldn't, without making it obvious. "Victoria's told us about your company's incredible legacy. 5 generations of excellence." Friedrich nodded approvingly. "Family is everything. Business," he waved a hand. "Business comes and goes. But family, loyalty, love, These endure. My wife understood this. She built our company not on contracts, but on relationships. To relationships, Greta raised her wine glass. And to new partnerships built on trust. They all drank. The wine was probably expensive. Elara could barely taste it past the anxiety coating her tongue. Dinner arrived in waves. Each course was art on a plate. Elara mechanically ate things she couldn't have named later. The conversation flowed around her. Julian and Friedrich discussing market trends, Greta asking about their journey. She provided appropriate responses, smiled, played her part. Then Friedrich's fork clattered gently against his plate. "Tell me," he said, leaning back, "how long have you two been together?" Elara's mind went blank. 2 years, Julian said smoothly. His hand found hers on the table, laced their fingers together. "Though if I'm honest, I fell for her the first day we met." Elara's brain caught up. She forced a smile. "He made a terrible first impression. I thought I was being charming." "You thought wrong." She squeezed his hand. Warning or agreement, she wasn't sure. "But he grew on me, eventually." "Like a fungus," Julian added, deadpan. Friedrich laughed. Actually laughed. "Ah, yes, the best marriages have fire. My Margot and I, we fought like cats. But we loved like—" He gestured helplessly. "There are no words, you understand?" "We do," Elara said. And for a moment, with Julian's thumb tracing circles on her palm under the table, she almost believed it. Greta leaned forward. "What was the moment when you knew it was real?" Another blank. Another dangerous silence. Julian's thumb stilled. Then, "There was a project. High stakes. We were fighting about approach. She had data. I had instinct. We were both too proud to admit the other might have a point." His voice softened. "Then she looked at me and said, 'What if we're both right?' That's when I knew." It had never happened, but Elara could picture it so clearly it felt like memory. "That's when I knew I wasn't just working with a competitor," Julian continued. "I was working with someone who could see possibilities I couldn't, someone who made me better." He was looking at her, really looking at her, and for a terrifying second, Elara forgot they were acting. Friedrich smiled. "This is what I wanted to see. Partnership, not just in business, but in soul." The rest of dinner passed in a blur. More wine, dessert that was probably incredible. At some point, Julian's hand moved to her knee under the table, just resting there, steady. When she didn't pull away, his fingers curled gently against the fabric of her dress. It felt like crossing an invisible line. But the strange thing was, it didn't feel wrong. The door to their suite closed behind them with brutal finality. Elara made it 3 steps into the room before her carefully constructed composure shattered. His hand moved to her knee. She spun to face Julian, her voice pitched between fury and something dangerously close to panic. "That wasn't in the rules." Julian pulled off his tie with sharp, precise movements. "The rules didn't account for Meyer being a human lie detector. So you decided to improvise?" "I decided to sell the story we're supposed to be selling." He draped the tie over a chair. "You think hand-holding would have convinced him? He's looking for chemistry, Vance. Connection, the kind of thing you can't fake with a checklist." "Don't." Elara's hands clenched into fists. "Don't lecture me about authenticity when you're the one who—" "Who what?" Julian's voice went quiet, dangerous. "Who saved your ass when you froze? Twice? When Meyer asked how we met, you looked like a deer in headlights. When Greta asked about the defining moment, you had nothing." He was right. She hated that he was right. "I didn't need saving." "Really? Because from where I was sitting, you were about 2 seconds from blowing the entire cover story." Julian crossed to the minibar, poured himself water with hands that weren't quite steady. "This isn't a strategy meeting, Elara. You can't control it with data and plans. You actually have to feel something." "I feel plenty," she shot back. "Yeah? What's that?" Because from where I'm standing, all I see is someone so terrified of being vulnerable that she'd rather fail than risk being human for 5 minutes. The words hit like a slap. Elara felt something crack open in her chest, something raw and wounded that she'd kept locked away for so long she'd forgotten it was there. You don't know anything about me. I know you'd rather be alone than risk letting someone see past the armor. Julian set down his glass. I know you've built walls so high you can't see over them anymore. And I know, he stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I know you're doing the same thing to me that you hate when people do it to you. Assuming the worst, seeing only what you expect to see. Ilara's throat tightened. What do you want from me, Julian? I want you to stop treating me like the enemy. His voice softened. Just for 3 days. Can you do that? Can you try? She should say no, should rebuild the walls, should remember why she'd kept him at arm's length for 2 years. Instead, she sank onto the couch. I'm sorry. Julian blinked. What? You were right. I froze. You covered for me. And that story you told, about me saying, what if we're both right, that was… She struggled to find words. That was good, really good. He joined her on the couch, kept a careful distance. Truce? Actual truce this time? Actual truce. Elara's laugh came out shaky. I'm not good at this. At what? Pretending, being soft. It's not, she swallowed. People see softness as weakness, especially women. I've spent my whole career proving I'm strong enough, smart enough, tough enough. Letting my guard down feels like giving up territory. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then, you know what I see when I look at you? Elara wasn't sure she wanted to know. What? Someone who's brilliant, driven, who cares so much about doing things right that it terrifies her to be wrong, and someone who's so afraid of failing that she won't let anyone help her succeed. It was too close, too true. The couch, Elara said abruptly. You can't sleep here. You'll destroy your back. I've slept in worse. We'll share the bed. She stood before she could second-guess herself. Properly, with pillows between us. Whatever you need to feel comfortable. But I'm not going to be responsible for you limping through meetings tomorrow because of some outdated chivalry. Julian studied her. You sure? Don't make me repeat myself. His smile returned, smaller, genuine. Yes, ma'am. The wall of Jericho, that's what Julian called it. The barricade of pillows currently dividing the king bed into 2 distinct territories. 4 pillows high, running down the center like a fabric Berlin Wall. This is ridiculous, Julian said, but he was arranging his side of the fortification with suspicious care. This is necessary. Elara smoothed her pajamas. Practical flannel, thank God she'd packed them. She'd been half afraid she'd only brought the silk set, and then what would she have done? Slept in her dress? She was thinking about pajamas, instead of the fact that she was about to sleep in the same bed as Julian Thorne. The man she'd spent 2 years verbally sparring with. The man whose every success felt like her failure. The man who was currently fluffing a pillow with an expression of deep concentration that would have been funny if her heart wasn't trying to escape her ribcage. Lights off? Julian asked. Yes, good, lights off. Darkness swallowed the room. The only sound was the wind outside and the creaking of the bed as they both carefully arranged themselves on their respective sides. Elara stared at the ceiling, counted her breaths, tried to think about tomorrow's meetings, about contract terms, about literally anything except the fact that Julian was less than 3 feet away, separated only by pillows and increasingly questionable life choices. Elara? His voice cut through the dark. What? Thank you. For tonight. For trying. She didn't have a response to that. Or rather, she had too many responses, and none of them were safe. Good night, Julian. Good night. Silence settled. Elara closed her eyes. She was 90% sure she wouldn't sleep at all. Sometime in the night, the pillows fell. Elara surfaced from sleep slowly, confused about why she was so warm. Then she registered, an arm around her waist, a chest against her back, breath stirring her hair. Julian. She went rigid. Her brain supplied 1,000 reasons to move, to put distance between them, to rebuild the wall. But his arm tightened in his sleep, and he murmured something she couldn't quite catch. And the terrifying part was that she felt safe. When was the last time she'd felt safe? Not since her father died when she was 19. Not since she'd realized that the world didn't give you space unless you carved it out yourself. Not since she'd learned that softness was a luxury women in corporate boardrooms couldn't afford. But here, in the dark, with Julian's heartbeat drumming steady against her spine, she felt like she could breathe without armor. She studied his hand where it rested against her stomach. Long fingers, a scar across his knuckles she'd never noticed before. He'd pushed up his sleeve in his sleep, revealing a watch she recognized. Vintage, probably expensive. The kind of detail that suggested he cared about craft, about quality, about things lasting. Had she ever really looked at him before? Or had she only seen the threat he represented? Someone as ambitious as her, as capable, competing for the same finite resources at the top. Outside, the wind picked up. The windows rattled softly in their frames. The Matterhorn was invisible now, swallowed by darkness and snow. They could be anywhere, or nowhere, suspended in a pocket of time that didn't count toward anything real. Julian's breath changed rhythm. He was waking up. Elara closed her eyes, feigning sleep. She felt him go still as he registered their position, felt the moment he realized the wall had fallen. She waited for him to pull away, to make some joke to diffuse the tension, to reset them back to safe distance. He didn't. Instead, his thumb moved. Just slightly, a gentle stroke against her hip through the fabric of her pajamas. Once, twice, like he was testing whether she was awake, like he was saying something without words. I'm here. You're safe. This is allowed. Elara's breath caught. She kept her eyes closed, kept her breathing even. Let herself have this one moment of dishonesty wrapped in too much truth. Eventually, minutes or hours, she couldn't tell, Julian carefully extracted his arm and shifted to his side of the bed. The cold rushed in to fill the space he left behind. Elara heard him get up, cross to the bathroom. The door clicked shut. Water ran. She opened her eyes. The pillow wall lay scattered across the floor like casualties of war. She didn't rebuild it. Elara woke to sunlight slicing through sheer curtains, and the immediate, crushing realization that her cheek was pressed against Julian's shoulder. Her arm was draped across his chest. His hand rested on her hip. Their legs were tangled like vines. She jerked back so fast she nearly fell off the bed. Julian's eyes snapped open. For one suspended moment, they stared at each other, his gray eyes wide, her heart hammering against her ribs. The space between them crackled with all the things neither could say. That was, Julian started. Nothing, Elara cut him off. That was nothing. We were asleep. Bodies gravitate toward heat. It's biology. Right, biology. He sat up, running a hand through sleep-mussed hair. The morning light caught the angles of his face in ways that were absolutely not relevant to anything. Very scientific. Exactly. Elara scrambled off the bed, putting the width of the room between them. Her flannel pajamas suddenly felt flimsy. I'm taking the first shower. She fled before he could respond. Under the spray of water hot enough to scald, Elara pressed her forehead against the tile and tried to remember who she was. Director of strategy, professional, in control, not someone who woke up wrapped around her fake fiancé, feeling things that had nothing to do with contracts or careers. It was the altitude, the stress, the sheer absurdity of the situation creating artificial intimacy. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. When she emerged 20 minutes later, fully dressed in designer ski wear she'd bought specifically for this trip, Julian was already dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that should have been illegal. He'd made coffee using the sweets machine. 2 cups, one black, hers, one with cream, his. He'd remembered. From the plane. "Breakfast with the Myers in 30 minutes, he said, handing her the mug. Their fingers brushed. Both of them pretended not to notice. "Right, breakfast." Elara took a sip. "Perfect temperature. We should probably discuss our story, in case they ask more questions." Already thought about it, Julian pulled out his phone, opened a note. Basic timeline. Met at company retreat 2 years ago. Started working together. Fought constantly. Realized fighting was our love language. Started dating 6 months later. Engaged last Christmas. It was clean, efficient, believable. Everything a good cover story should be. So why did it make her chest ache? "One thing," Julian added, his voice careful. "About last night, the bed situation." Elara's stomach dropped. "What about it?" "We should probably acknowledge it, instead of pretending it didn't happen, because pretending makes it weird." He was right. Of course he was right. "Fine." Elara set down her mug with excessive care. "We fell asleep. The pillows fell. We ended up close. It happens. It doesn't mean anything." "Doesn't mean anything," Julian echoed. Something in his expression shifted, closed off. "Great. We're on the same page." They weren't. Elara could feel the lie sitting between them like a third person in the room. But acknowledging that would mean acknowledging everything else. And she wasn't ready for that. She might never be ready for that. "We should go," she said. Julian nodded, grabbed his coat, held the door open for her with the kind of careful courtesy that felt more like distance than manners. As they walked down the corridor toward breakfast, his hand found hers. For the cameras, she told herself, for the performance. But his thumb was tracing circles on her palm again, and her treacherous heart was learning the rhythm. The ski slope stretched out like something from a dream. White powder caught the sun and threw it back in diamonds. The air was so crisp it could shatter, and Elara was absolutely definitely going to die. "You've done this before, yes?" Greta Meyer adjusted her designer goggles, effortlessly elegant even in full ski gear. "Oh, absolutely," Elara lied. She'd been to Aspen once, for a conference. She'd stayed in the lodge and worked the entire time. Julian glanced at her. She saw the exact moment he clocked the truth. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Then he smiled that public smile, the one he used in client meetings, and moved closer. "Elara's more of a cross-country skier, aren't you, darling?" Darling. The words should have sounded fake. Instead, it slid over her skin like silk. "I prefer the scenic routes," Elara agreed, grateful for the save. Friedrich clapped his gloved hands together. "Excellent. We'll take the gentle slope. Greta, you and I will lead. Julian, Elara, you follow." They pushed off. Greta and Friedrich moved with the easy grace of people who'd been skiing since childhood. Elara managed approximately 3 feet before her skis decided to go in opposite directions. She was going down. Hard. Julian's arm caught her waist, steadied her, kept her upright through sheer force of will and well-timed intervention. "Easy," he murmured, close to her ear. "Lean back. Let the skis do the work." "I am leaning back." "You're fighting gravity. Stop thinking. Just feel." "I don't know how to stop thinking." I noticed. But there was no bite in it, just something almost fond. "Here, like this." He positioned himself behind her. His hands covered hers on the poles, his chest pressed against her back. In this position, he could guide her movements, adjust her weight distribution, keep her from face-planting into snow that probably cost more per square foot than her apartment. "This is humiliating," Elara muttered. "This is trust." Julian's breath was warm against her ear. "Let me help you, just for a few minutes." Something in his voice made her relax, just fractionally, enough. They started down the slope together. Julian's body moved with hers, anticipating turns, shifting weight, murmuring instructions that barely registered as words. It was less like skiing and more like dancing. Except dancing required less protective gear and involved significantly less risk of death. "You're doing it," Julian said, and she was. The world was rushing past in whites and blues. Her heart was pounding with adrenaline that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the man currently pressed against her back, guiding her down a mountain like it was the most natural thing in the world. At the bottom of the slope, Greta and Friedrich were waiting with approving smiles. "Beautiful form," Friedrich called out. "You two move like one person." Julian's hands lingered on Elara's waist for one beat too long before he stepped back. When he did, she felt the absence like cold water. "She's a quick study," Julian said. Greta's knowing smile suggested she saw right through them, but all she said was, "Love teaches patience, doesn't it?" Elara met Julian's eyes, found him already looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It does," he said softly. And Elara had the terrible suspicion he wasn't talking about skiing anymore. Hot chocolate. That's what they served at the mountain cafe. Actual Swiss hot chocolate, thick enough to stand a spoon in, topped with cream that probably violated multiple health regulations and tasted like heaven-made liquid. Elara wrapped both hands around the mug and tried not to think about how Julian had looked teaching her to ski. Patient, gentle. Nothing like the arrogant creative director who'd spent 2 years making her work life miserable. Across the table, Friedrich was telling a story about his late wife's first ski lesson. Greta laughed, adding details. Julian listened with apparent fascination, asking questions that suggested he actually cared about the answers. When had she started noticing the way he listened, the way he gave people his full attention, like they were the only person in the world that mattered? She'd spent 2 years cataloging his flaws, building a case for why he was wrong for every project, every campaign, every strategic decision. Now she was sitting here, watching him charm her most important clients, and all she could think was, "I don't actually know him at all." "Elara?" Greta's voice pulled her back. "You're very quiet." "Just enjoying the view." Elara gestured toward the window, where the Matterhorn dominated the horizon. "Safe answer. Neutral." "It's magnificent, isn't it? My mother proposed to my father on that mountain." Greta's smile turned wistful. She said any love that could survive the climb was worth keeping. "Your mother proposed?" Julian leaned forward, genuinely interested. 1952. Very scandalous." Greta's eyes twinkled. "She was American. Didn't believe in waiting for men to make decisions. My father was horrified and utterly charmed." Friedrich raised his mug. "To women who know what they want and aren't afraid to take it." They all drank. The chocolate coated Elara's throat, rich and warm and complicated. "What about you two?" Friedrich asked. "Who proposed?" Panic flickered. They hadn't discussed this. Elara opened her mouth. "I did," Julian said, "though she made me work for it." Elara's pulse jumped. "You practiced for 2 weeks." Where had that come from? But Julian ran with it. 3 weeks. I wanted it perfect. Kept chickening out. He looked at her, and the story wove itself between them like magic. Finally did it on a Tuesday, middle of the week. Nothing special. We were in the office, working late on a pitch. I looked over and she had this little crease right here. He reached across the table, touched the space between her eyebrows. The gesture was so casual, so intimate, that Elara forgot to breathe. And I just knew. If I didn't ask right then, I might lose my nerve. What did she say? Greta was leaning forward now. Julian's thumb traced along Elara's jaw, still looking at her, only at her. She said yes. Then she said we should probably finish the pitch first. Very practical, very her. It had never happened, but Elara could see it so clearly. The late office, the fluorescent lights, Julian nervous for once in his perpetually confident life. The version of herself in that story wasn't the woman she'd become. That version was softer, braver. She wanted to be that version. That's perfect, Greta said softly. Real love isn't always grand gestures. Sometimes it's just Tuesday. Friedrich nodded sagely. The everyday moments, those are what matter. After lunch, after they'd said goodbye to the Myers and were walking back to the resort, Elara finally found her voice. A Tuesday proposal. That was good. Seemed right. Julian's hands were in his pockets. He wasn't looking at her. You're not a grand gesture person. You'd hate public proposals, restaurants, crowds. He was right. How did he know that? The crease, she heard herself say, between my eyebrows. How did you know about that? Julian stopped walking, turned to face her. You do it when you're thinking hard, trying to solve something. I've seen it 100 times. He paused. I've probably seen it more than anything else about you. The weight of that settled between them. 2 years of watching, noticing, building databases of each other's habits without meaning to. We should get back, Elara said, because she didn't know what else to say. Julian nodded, started walking again, but his hand found hers as they crossed the icy path, and this time there were no cameras to blame it on. The resort bar was all amber light and leather. A jazz quartet played something smoky in the corner. Elara had changed for dinner, a deep blue dress that made her feel almost elegant, and was nursing a gin and tonic while Julian spoke with the bartender about Scotch varieties she couldn't pronounce. That's when Klaus approached. Not their driver Klaus, different Klaus, taller, younger, with the kind of smile that knew exactly how effective it was. You're with the Meyer party, yes? He slid onto the bar stool next to her, uninvited. Klaus Berger. My family owns the ski equipment shop in town. Elara Vance. She kept her tone polite but cool, professional. I noticed you on the slopes today. Your first time skiing? That obvious? Charmingly obvious. His smile widened. I could give you private lessons. If you're interested, I'm very good with beginners. The offer sounded like anything but skiing lessons. That's generous, Elara said carefully. But I'm here with your colleague, yes. Julian, is it? I saw him speaking with Mr. Meyer. Klaus leaned in, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, aggressive. But business doesn't have to mean pleasure can't happen. Zermatt is very beautiful at night. I could show you places tourists never see. Elara felt her professional smile harden. I'm not interested. You sure? Because you look like a woman who... A hand appeared on the bar between them. Julian's hand. Followed by Julian's body, positioning itself between Elara and Klaus, with the casual precision of someone claiming territory. There you are, darling. Julian's voice was pure silk over steel. I was just telling Hans about that restaurant you wanted to try. The one with the mountain views? Klaus blinked, looked between them. Oh, I didn't realize. No, Julian said pleasantly. You didn't. His hand found the small of Elara's back. Possessive, protective. Everything they'd agreed was off limits. But Elara found herself leaning into the touch anyway. Klaus was just offering ski lessons, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. How kind. Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. But Elara prefers my teaching style. Don't you, love? The word love rolled off his tongue like a threat wrapped in velvet. Klaus had the sense to recognize a losing battle. Well, enjoy your evening. He retreated toward the far end of the bar. Julian's hand stayed on Elara's back, burning through the fabric of her dress like a brand. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. Why? Julian turned to face her. His eyes were storm dark, intense in ways that had nothing to do with pretending. Because he was looking at you like you were something he could take. And you're not. You're not anyone's conquest. I can handle myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. Not here. Not when... He stopped, jaw clenched. Not when I'm supposed to be your fiancé. Real or not, that means something. Elara's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. What does it mean, Julian? The question hung between them. Too big, too dangerous. Julian's thumb moved against her spine, just slightly. It means no one gets to treat you like that while I'm here. Contract or no contract. Performance or... He didn't finish the sentence. Or, Elara whispered. The bartender appeared with Julian's scotch. The moment shattered. Julian stepped back, and Elara felt the loss of his touch like a physical thing. We should get dinner, he said. His voice had gone careful again. Professional. The Myers are expecting us at 8. Elara nodded, took her gin and tonic, tried to ignore the way her hands were shaking. As they walked toward the dining room, Julian's hand found hers, laced their fingers together. She told herself it was for show, for any staff who might be watching, for the role they were playing. But his grip was too tight for pretending, and she was holding on just as hard. How did you meet? The question came from Greta, over dessert that was probably exquisite but tasted like ash in Elara's mouth. They'd navigated the entire meal with careful answers and practiced smiles. Now this, the question they'd somehow failed to choreograph. Elara's mind raced through possibilities. Company retreat, mutual friend, coffee shop meet cute. None of them sounded right. Julian's hand covered hers on the table. Company retreat, he said smoothly. 2 years ago. Vermont. That matched their timeline. Good. Safe. But that's not when we met, Elara heard herself say. Julian's fingers tensed. She pushed forward, following an instinct she didn't understand. The company retreat is when we started working together, but we met before that, at a gallery opening. The story spooled out like thread from a spool she hadn't known existed. A mutual friends exhibition. I don't even remember the artist's name now, but Julian was there, looking at this painting, abstract, all blues and grays. He was just staring at it, like he was trying to decode a message. I was, Julian said softly. His eyes were on her now, only her. I was trying to understand what the artist was feeling when they made it. I told him that was impossible. Art is subjective. There's no single correct interpretation. And I said that was exactly the point. The mystery was the message. Julian's thumb moved against her knuckles. We argued for 20 minutes about art, about meaning, about whether uncertainty was a feature or a bug. Elara remembered. Oh God, she remembered. It had been 3 years ago, not 2, before they'd worked together, before the rivalry. She'd worn a black dress and he'd worn a navy suit, and they'd stood in front of that painting arguing about epistemology and aesthetics until the gallery closed. She'd forgotten, or buried it, because remembering meant acknowledging that there had been a version of them that existed before the competition, before the walls, before they'd become enemies by corporate circumstance. Then what happened? Friedrich asked, captivated. Then the gallery closed, Julian said, and I asked if she wanted to continue the argument over coffee. She said no, gave me her card, told me to email her if I ever figured out what the painting meant. Did you? Greta leaned forward. No. Julian's smile turned rueful. Because a week later, she walked into the company retreat as the new director of strategy. And I realized I'd been arguing with my new colleague, someone I'd have to work with, compete with, so I never sent that email. The silence that followed felt like gravity had increased. But you got together eventually? Friedrich prompted. Eventually, Elara said. Her voice sounded far away. It took us 2 years of fighting about work before we remembered we'd already had our first fight. About art, about meaning, about all the things that don't have easy answers. And when you remembered? Greta's eyes were shining. Julian looked at Elara, really looked at her. When we remembered, we realized we'd been falling in love the entire time. We just called it other things. Competition, tension, hate. It wasn't true. It was completely true. It was the worst kind of lie, the kind built on foundations of forgotten truth. Elara couldn't breathe. That's beautiful, Greta said. The best love stories are the ones where the couple has to find their way back to each other. After dinner, walking back to the suite through corridors that felt narrower than before, Elara finally spoke. That gallery opening, that was real. Yes. Why didn't you tell me you remembered? Julian stopped walking. Because you forgot, or pretended to forget. And I thought maybe that was easier, for both of us. Nothing about this is easy. No, Julian agreed. It's really not. They stood in the hallway, close enough to touch, neither of them moving. The resort was quiet around them, just the distant sound of music from the bar, the whisper of heating vents, the thundering of Elara's heart. I liked you, Julian said quietly. That night, before I knew who you were, before work got in the way, I liked you so much it scared me. And then when you walked into that retreat, I thought, he laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought maybe the universe was giving me a second chance. But instead, it put us in competition, made us enemies. And I told myself that was better, safer. Safer than what? Than this, he gestured between them. Than wanting something I couldn't have. Than falling for someone who saw me as the enemy. Elara's throat tightened. I didn't see you as the enemy. No, you were the threat. There's a difference. Is there? She didn't have an answer for that, so instead she closed the distance between them and kissed him. The kiss lasted approximately 3 seconds before Elara's brain caught up with her body, and she jerked back like she'd been electrocuted. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. That was... Words failed. Her entire vocabulary had apparently evacuated. Julian stood frozen. His eyes were wide, pupils blown. His lips were parted. He looked as shocked as she felt. The spa, Elara blurted. The Myers mentioned the spa, the thermal pools, very relaxing. We should go, together, to maintain appearances. She was babbling. She never babbled. Elara, I'll get my swimsuit. She fumbled with the keycard, dropped it. Julian bent to pick it up at the same time she did, and they nearly cracked skulls. Sorry. Inside the suite, she grabbed her swimsuit and fled to the bathroom to change before Julian could say anything. Before she had to acknowledge what she'd just done. Before the walls she'd so carefully constructed could collapse completely. The thermal pool complex was at the resort's lower level. Carved stone, steam rising in clouds, soft blue lighting that made everything look like a dream, or a very expensive hallucination. Elara lowered herself into the water and tried to pretend her entire nervous system wasn't on fire. The pool was body temperature. Minerals made the water silky. It should have been relaxing. It was torture. Because Julian emerged from the men's changing area in swim trunks that should have been illegal, and suddenly all the steam in the room wasn't enough to hide behind. He slipped into the water across from her, kept his distance. The pool was large enough that 2 people could avoid each other easily. They weren't avoiding each other. About what happened, Julian started. We don't have to talk about it. I think we do. It was a mistake. Adrenaline, stress. The altitude affects judgment. The altitude. Julian's voice was flat. Right. Elara stared at the water, at the way it moved around her fingers when she traced patterns on the surface. Anything to avoid looking at him. We have rules, boundaries. I violated them. It won't happen again. Won't it? The question made her look up. Julian was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He moved through the water, not fast, not aggressive, just steady, inevitable. Tell me to stop, he said. Elara couldn't. Didn't. The word stuck in her throat like a stone. Julian stopped inches away, close enough that she could see water droplets caught in his eyelashes, close enough that the steam between them felt like breathing the same air. Tell me you didn't mean it, he said quietly. Tell me it was just the act, just the performance. Tell me you feel nothing, and I'll never bring it up again. We'll go back to the rules, the boundaries, the safe distance. Elara opened her mouth. The lie should have been easy. She'd been lying to herself for 2 years. What was one more? But she looked at Julian, really looked at him, and saw everything she'd been refusing to see. The way he'd protected her from Klaus. The way he'd caught her on the slopes. The way he'd remembered a gallery opening she'd tried to forget. The way he'd been falling for her while she convinced herself they were enemies. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't what?" "Can't tell you I feel nothing. Because I don't. I don't feel nothing." Julian's hand came up, cupped her jaw. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "What do you feel?" "Terrified." "Of what?" "Of this, of you. Of the fact that you're supposed to be the worst thing for my career and somehow you've become—" She couldn't finish, couldn't say it out loud. "Elara." Her name was a prayer, a question, a plea. She kissed him again. This time she didn't pull away. The kiss was everything the hallway kiss wasn't. Slow, deep, deliberate. Julian's hand slid into her hair, tilted her head, and took his time learning the shape of her mouth. Elara's hands found his shoulders, his neck, the wet heat of his skin under her fingers. The steam wrapped around them. The water lapped gently. And for the first time in 2 years, Elara let herself stop thinking and just feel. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian pressed his forehead to hers. "We should probably talk about this." "Probably." "Set new rules." "Definitely." Neither of them moved. The space between them was barely space at all. "Tomorrow," Elara said. "We'll talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Julian agreed, but his hand stayed on her waist, and her hand stayed on his shoulders, and the gap between tomorrow and now felt infinite. The argument started over nothing, over everything, over the fact that Elara woke up alone in bed again and found Julian already dressed, already armored, already back behind walls that hadn't existed 12 hours ago. "You're avoiding me," she said, standing in the bathroom doorway while he tied his tie with military precision. "I'm getting ready for the presentation. That's not for 3 hours. I like to be prepared. You like to run away." Julian's hands stilled on his tie. "Excuse me?" "Last night, the pool. She gestured helplessly. "We had a moment, multiple moments. And now you're acting like it didn't happen." "I'm acting professional." "You're acting terrified." "I'm not terrified." But his voice had an edge to it that said otherwise. "I'm being realistic. This," he gestured between them, "is complicated. We have a contract to close. Jobs on the line. We can't afford to be distracted." Distracted. The word tasted bitter. "Is that what I am to you?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Julian turned to face her fully. "I meant that last night was incredible and dangerous. And if we're not careful, we're going to do something stupid, like actually fall for each other. And then what? We go home, back to the office, back to being competitors, back to reality, where this," he gestured again more forcefully, "doesn't work." "Why doesn't it work?" "Because I'm creative and you're strategy, because we want different things, because for 2 years we've been at each other's throats, and 3 days in Switzerland doesn't change that." "Maybe it does." "It doesn't." Julian's voice went cold. "This is a bubble, Elara. Beautiful, expensive, artificial. None of this is real." The words hit like a slap. "So last night meant nothing." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Elara turned, grabbed her coat, needed air, space, anything but this suite that suddenly felt like a cage. "Where are you going?" "Out, to think, to remember why I don't do relationships, to—" Her voice cracked. She hated that it cracked. "To be anywhere but here." The door closed behind her harder than she meant it to. Outside, the morning was brutally beautiful. Sun on snow, blue sky that hurt to look at. Elara walked without direction, just movement, just the need to put distance between herself and the man who just confirmed every fear she'd ever had about letting someone in. She ended up at the edge of the resort property, where the manicured grounds gave way to actual wilderness. Pine trees heavy with snow, the sound of wind, silence that felt like space to breathe. "Thought I might find you here." Elara spun. Julian stood 10 feet away, hands in pockets, looking as wrecked as she felt. "I'm not ready to talk to you yet." "I'm not here to talk." He moved closer. "I'm here to apologize for being a coward, for saying things I didn't mean because I was scared of saying things I did mean." "Julian, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "You were right, I was running, because last night terrified me. Not because it wasn't real, because it was. Because for the first time in 2 years, I kissed you, and it felt like coming home. And that's," he laughed, sharp and self-deprecating, "that's the scariest thing I've ever felt." Elara's throat was tight. "Why?" "Because I'm good at my job, great even. I know how to read people, sell ideas, make them believe in visions that don't exist yet. But this, you, I have no idea what I'm doing. And the thought of screwing this up, of hurting you, of losing whatever this is." He stopped, met her eyes. "It made me panic. So I said the cruelest thing I could think of, that none of this was real. When the truth is, it's the most real thing I've felt in years." Snow fell between them, soft, silent. "I'm not good at this either," Elara admitted. "At being vulnerable, at admitting I want something, someone, at risking my career for—" She couldn't finish. "For what?" Julian asked softly. "For the possibility of us." The words hung in the cold air, visible, undeniable. Julian closed the distance. "What if we stop trying to figure it out? Stop worrying about Monday, about the office, about what makes sense? What if we just see what happens?" "That's very unlike you. You're the vision guy, the 10 steps ahead planner. And you're the strategy expert. But maybe some things can't be strategized." His gloved hand found hers. "Maybe some things you just have to feel your way through." Elara looked at their joined hands, at the man she'd spent 2 years fighting, at the possibility that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Let's see what happens. No more running, no more walls, just—" She squeezed his hand. "Just us, for however long we have." Julian pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her temple, her mouth, and Elara let herself fall. The presentation went perfectly. Of course it did. They'd prepared for weeks, knew the material cold, could have delivered it in their sleep. But standing in the Myers private conference room, watching Julian move through slides with the confidence of someone who believed in every word, Elara realized something that should have been obvious. They were brilliant together. He brought vision, she brought structure. He inspired, she executed. His creativity made her strategies sing. Her frameworks gave his ideas wings. They weren't competing, they were complementing, had been the whole time. She'd been so busy seeing him as a threat that she'd missed the fact that he was her perfect professional partner. And maybe more than that. "This is exactly what we wanted to see," Friedrich said when they finished. "Not just a campaign, a philosophy, a way of thinking about our brand that honors tradition while embracing future." Greta nodded. "You two make a formidable team, in business and in life." They signed the contract that afternoon, 60 million euros, the biggest win of either of their careers. They should have been celebrating, should have been calling Victoria, should have been riding high on professional triumph. Instead, Elara felt hollow, because in 48 hours, they'd fly home, back to the office, back to separate departments and competing priorities, back to a world where this, whatever this was, didn't fit into org charts or career trajectories. That night, after a celebratory dinner where they toasted success with champagne that cost more than her monthly rent. Elara stood at the suite window and watched snow fall over the Matterhorn. Julian came up behind her, didn't touch, just stood there, a presence at her shoulder. "Penny, for your thoughts. I'm thinking about Monday." "We agreed not to think about Monday." "I can't help it. It's what I do. I plan. I strategize. I look at variables and calculate outcomes." "And what outcome do you see?" Elara's reflection stared back at her from the window. "I see us going home. You in creative, me in strategy, still reporting to the same CEO, still competing for the same budgets and resources and recognition. Still," she stopped, swallowed, "still everything that kept us apart for 2 years. Or," Julian said quietly, "you see us going home and choosing each other anyway, choosing to make this work despite the complications. Because of them. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's worth fighting for." His hand found her shoulder, turned her to face him. "You're worth fighting for." Elara's eyes stung. "What if we can't? What if the office politics and the competition and the pressure, what if it destroys this?" "What if it doesn't?" Julian cupped her face. "What if we're strong enough to handle complicated? What if 2 years of fighting taught us exactly how to fight for each other instead of against each other?" "That's optimistic." "Someone has to be." He smiled. "You can't strategy your way through everything, Elara. Sometimes you have to leap." "I don't leap." "I know, but I do." Julian's thumb traced her cheekbone. "So how about this? I'll leap first, and you can follow when you're ready. No pressure, no timeline, just possibility." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm in love with you." The words landed like snowflakes, soft, undeniable. "I think I have been since that gallery opening 3 years ago. I definitely have been since you walked into that company retreat and looked at me like I was a puzzle you couldn't solve. And I'm saying that when we get home, I'm going to ask you on a real date. Not for a contract, not for appearances, just because I want to spend time with you. And I'm going to keep asking until you say yes. Or until you tell me definitively that we are impossible." Elara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the weight of his words settling into her bones like truth. "You can't. We work together. It's complicated." "I know. It could ruin both our careers." "I know. It's possibly the worst idea you've ever had." "Probably." Julian's smile turned crooked. "But I've never been good at playing it safe, and neither have you. Not really. You just pretend you are because it feels like armor. But armor gets heavy, Elara. At some point you have to take it off." She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this couldn't work, wanted to build a case with data and logic and risk assessment. Instead, she kissed him, long, deep, with everything she couldn't say out loud yet, with everything she was terrified to feel, with the possibility of them. When they broke apart, Julian was smiling. "Is that a yes to dinner?" "It's a yes to considering dinner." "I'll take it." He kissed her forehead. "We should probably pack. Early flight tomorrow." "We should." Neither of them moved. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally arrived. Wind rattled the windows. Snow fell thick enough to erase the world. And Elara thought, this is what falling feels like. This terror, this exhilaration, this complete loss of control. She'd spent her entire adult life avoiding exactly this feeling. Turns out, it was the only feeling that mattered. The cabin was small, emergency shelter for hikers caught by weather. One room, one fireplace, supplies enough for a night, not enough for comfort. They'd been on their way to survey a property the Myers owned higher up the mountain, a potential venue for future corporate retreats. The storm had come up fast, too fast. Their guide Klaus, yet another Klaus, Switzerland apparently had a Klaus surplus, had radioed for them to shelter in place. Rescue would come when the weather cleared. Hours, maybe longer. Well, Julian said, dropping his pack, this is cozy. Cozy was generous. The cabin was maybe 12 feet square, ancient wood stove in the corner, a cot that had seen better decades, frost on the inside of the windows. Elara's teeth were chattering. Her jacket was good, but not good enough for this. Julian was already moving, building a fire with efficient movements that suggested this wasn't his first emergency shelter. You've done this before, Elara observed. College, went hiking in Patagonia with friends who had more confidence than sense, got caught in a storm, spent 2 days in a cave eating protein bars in melting snow for water. He struck a match. Flame caught. This is luxury by comparison. The fire grew. Heat radiated slowly, grudgingly, into the frozen space. Elara moved closer, holding her hands out to the warmth. Julian draped a wool blanket around her shoulders without asking. We should contact the resort, she said. Radio's dead. Storm's blocking signal. They'll worry. They'll know we're safe. Standard protocol is shelter in place. Someone will come when it's clear. How long? Julian looked at the window, at the wall of white beyond it. Hours, maybe morning. Hours. Stuck in a tiny cabin with the man she just admitted feelings for. With one cot, one blanket, and absolutely no buffers or distractions. I should check the supplies, Elara said, needing something to do with her hands. She found emergency rations, bottled water, a first aid kit, and 3 more wool blankets. She brought everything to the cot and started organizing with the kind of focus she usually reserved for budget spreadsheets. Elara, we should inventory everything. Make sure we have enough if this goes overnight. Elara. And we should establish a schedule. For the fire, it'll need to be fed every... Elara, Julian's hand covered hers, stilled her frantic movement. It's okay. We're okay. We're stuck. In a storm. In the middle of nowhere. We're safe, together, with heat and supplies and time. His thumb traced her knuckles. When's the last time you just stopped? Stopped? Not thinking, not planning, not strategizing your way through every variable. Just being. Elara wanted to argue. Couldn't. Because he was right. She couldn't remember the last time she'd let herself just exist, without purpose or productivity. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, really. Julian pulled her down to sit beside him on the cot. But we could learn, together. We've got nothing but time. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. The cabin felt like the only place in the world that existed. Tell me something, Elara said. Something real. Something I don't know. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then, I almost didn't take this job. 2 years ago, when I got the offer, I had another offer from a boutique agency in New York. More money, more prestige, more everything. Why didn't you take it? Because I walked past this company during the interview loop, looked in the window, and I saw you. Working late, you had your hair up, glasses on, 3 screens going at once, and this expression like you were solving world hunger through Excel. He smiled, and I thought, I wonder what it would be like to work with someone that focused, that passionate, that alive. Elara's breath caught. You chose this job because of me? I chose this job despite you, because I knew if I worked with you, I'd either hate you or fall for you, and I couldn't tell which would be worse. His hand found her face. Turns out, I did both. Julian, your turn. Tell me something real. Elara looked at the fire, at the shadows dancing on the walls, at anything but him. I've been alone my whole adult life, by choice, because every time I let someone in, every time I tried to be soft or vulnerable or anything other than strong, it backfired. My father died when I was 19. I had to be strong for my mom, then college. Had to be strong to compete, then career. Had to be strong to survive. And somewhere in all that strength, I forgot how to be anything else. You're not just strong, Julian said quietly. You're brilliant and kind and funny when you forget to be guarded and scared, which is the most human thing about you. Scared of what? Same thing I am. Of wanting something you might not get. Of loving someone who might leave. Of risking everything for a maybe. The word loving settled between them like gravity. Is that what this is? Elara whispered. Love? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Julian turned her to face him. All I know is that I want to find out. And I think you do too. But you're waiting for guarantees I can't give you. No one can. I need control, structure, certainty. I know. But love isn't any of those things, Elara. Love is trust without proof. It's choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. It's... He stopped, laughed softly. Listen to me. Acting like I know what love is. I don't. But I know what it feels like. And it feels like you. Elara's eyes were hot. I'm terrified of this. Me too. What if we fail? What if we fly? She kissed him, not because she had answers, because she didn't. Because sometimes the only way through fear was straight ahead. They lay down on the cot together, tangled in blankets in each other. The fire cast gold over everything. And in that tiny cabin, surrounded by storm, Elara finally let herself fall completely. The kiss was everything. Urgent, desperate, 2 years of fighting channeled into connection. Julian's hands in her hair, Elara's fingers digging into his shoulders. The cot was too small and the blankets kept shifting, and nothing had ever felt more right. Until Elara's brain kicked back in. She pulled back, breathing hard. We should stop. Why? Julian's voice was rough. His lips were swollen. He looked as wrecked as she felt. Because we're not thinking clearly. Adrenaline, the storm, the isolation. This isn't, she struggled for words. This isn't a decision we should make in a cabin during a blizzard. Why not? Because it's extreme circumstances. Because when we get back to the resort, to reality, we'll regret. I won't, Julian sat up. I won't regret you, any of this. But if you need time, we can wait. It's not about time. It's about, Elara stood, paced the small space. It's about the fact that in 24 hours, we go home, back to the office, where you're creative and I'm strategy, where we compete for budget and attention and resources, where this, she gestured between them, becomes a liability or an asset. You're not being realistic, and you're being too realistic. Julian stood too. You're already planning our failure, writing off the possibility before we even try. I'm protecting us both. From what? From happiness? From taking a chance on something that could be incredible? From the inevitable disaster when workplace politics tear us apart, Elara's voice rose. I've worked too hard to get here. I'm not going to throw it away for what? Say it. For a relationship that probably won't survive the real world. The words hung there, brutal, honest. Julian's expression went carefully blank. Right, of course. Can't risk the career for something as trivial as connection, or love, or any of the things that actually make life worth living. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is you deciding for both of us that we're doomed. What's not fair is you using fear as strategy. He grabbed his jacket. I'm going to check on the storm. Julian, don't. The door opened. Wind and snow blasted in. Then he was gone. Elara stood in the empty cabin, shaking. Not from cold, from the magnitude of what she'd just done. She'd pushed away the first person in years who'd seen through her armor and loved her anyway. Because that's what you do when you're terrified. You push. You build walls. You choose safety over possibility. She sank onto the cot, put her head in her hands, and let herself cry for the first time in longer than she could remember. When Julian came back 20 minutes later, snow dusting his shoulders, she looked up with red eyes. I'm sorry. He crossed to the fire, added wood, didn't look at her. For what? For being scared, for pushing you away, her voice broke, for being so afraid of failing that I'm failing before we even start. Julian finally turned. His expression was softer. You're not the only one who's scared. You hide it better. I've had practice. He sat beside her, not touching. My parents divorced when I was 12. Messy, brutal. They loved each other once. Then they worked together. Then they destroyed each other. I watched love turn into ammunition. So yeah, I'm scared too. Terrified. But I'm more scared of not trying. Elara's hand found his. What if we become them? What if we don't? Julian squeezed her fingers. We're not your parents, or mine. We're us, and maybe that's enough. I don't know how to do this, how to be vulnerable and strong at the same time. Neither do I, but we could figure it out, together, if you're willing to try. Elara looked at their joined hands, at the man who'd seen her at her worst and stayed, at the possibility of them. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Let's try, really try. Not just here, not just in Switzerland, but when we get home, in the real world, where it's complicated and messy and hard. Julian pulled her close, kissed her temple. It's going to be a disaster. Probably. We're going to fight. Definitely. But at least we'll fight together. Elara laughed, or sobbed, or both. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Wait until we get home. I'm going to be insufferably romantic. I'm going to hate it. You're going to love it. He was right. She was. The rescue came at dawn. The storm had cleared, leaving everything crystalline and new. The helicopter that picked them up looked official and expensive. The kind of thing that happened when you were clients of the Meyer family. Back at the resort, the Meyers were waiting with concern and hot chocolate, and the news that their flight had been rescheduled for that afternoon to account for the weather delay. You must have been terrified, Greta said, clutching Elara's hands. We managed, Elara said. She met Julian's eyes across the room, saw his small smile. Her own lips curved in response. They managed. In the suite, packing in silence that felt comfortable instead of tense, Elara's phone buzzed. Victoria. She'd been ignoring messages for a day. Guilt and responsibility surged back. She answered. Victoria. Elara, thank God. I heard about the storm. Are you both safe? We're fine. Contracts signed. Everything went perfectly. Excellent. Listen, I need you on something as soon as you land. The Anderson account is imploding. I need your strategic mind on damage control immediately. Reality. Cold and swift and impossible to ignore. Of course, Elara said automatically. I'll head straight to the office. Good. And Elara, excellent work. This Meyer deal is going to change everything for us. The call ended. Elara stared at her phone, at the immediate return to crisis and competition, and all the things that had defined her life before Switzerland. The Anderson account, Julian said. He was standing in the bedroom doorway. I heard. My team pitched that campaign. I know. So you'll be fixing my team's mistakes, first thing Monday. That's my job. The words felt wrong, tasted like ash. Julian crossed to her. This is what you were afraid of, the reality, the competition. Yes. And you're already pulling away. I can see it happening. The walls going back up. I have to. We have to. This is... She gestured helplessly. This is who we are, what we do. No. Julian's voice was firm. This is what we did, past tense. But it doesn't have to be what we keep doing. He took her hands. The Anderson account is a problem. Fine. We solve it together. You bring strategy. I bring creative. We fix it as a team instead of as adversaries. Victoria wants results. She doesn't care about department politics. She cares about winning. And we just proved we're unstoppable together. He squeezed her hands. Don't make decisions based on fear of what might happen. Make them based on what we know is true. We're better together. Elara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the magic of Switzerland could survive the harsh light of office fluorescence. What if it's not enough? Then we'll figure it out. But we have to try, really try, not with one foot out the door already planning the exit strategy. He was right. She'd been doing exactly that, preparing for failure before giving success a chance. Okay, she said, we try, for real. For real, Julian echoed. Then he kissed her, and it felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. On the flight home, somewhere over the Atlantic, Elara's head resting on Julian's shoulder, she thought about risk and reward, about the things you could quantify and the things you couldn't, about love being the ultimate failure of logic and the greatest success of faith. She still didn't know if they would work. But for the first time in her careful, controlled life, she was willing to find out. They landed at JFK in rain that felt like a cosmic joke after Swiss sunshine. Gray skies, traffic, the smell of exhaust and humanity, reality in its least romantic form. Julian's hand found hers as they waited for luggage. Still in? Still terrified. I'll take that as a yes. In the taxi back to the city, Elara's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from her team, urgent flags on emails, the Anderson crisis expanding in real time. I should go to the office, she said. It's Sunday. I know. Julian was quiet. Then, want company? She looked at him, at the man who'd become something she couldn't quite name, but didn't want to lose. You don't have to. I want to, if you'll let me. It was such a small thing, going to the office together, but it felt monumental. The first test, the first choice to show up as a unit instead of as competitors. Okay, Elara said, but I'm buying coffee first. Deal. At the office, the building was mostly empty. Janitors, a few workaholics who lived for spreadsheets and deadlines. They rode the elevator to the executive floor in silence. At Elara's office door, Julian paused. I meant what I said, about doing this together, about being a team. I know. But I also know you need to work, so I'll be in my office if you need me. No pressure, just possibility. He kissed her forehead and walked away. Elara watched him go, then entered her office and stared at her computer screen until the screensaver kicked in. She pulled up the Anderson file. It was bad, worse than she'd thought. Creative execution had missed the mark so completely it bordered on sabotage. The client was threatening to pull out. Legal was involved. She should dig in, start building the fix. Do what she did best, solve problems through sheer force of strategic will. Instead, she picked up her phone and texted Julian, "My office, bring your tablet, I have an idea." He appeared 3 minutes later, hair slightly mussed, tie loosened, looking at her like she was the most important thing in the building. "What's the idea?" he asked. "We fix this, together, like we fixed Meyer. Your creative instincts plus my strategic framework. We show Victoria and everyone else that we're not enemies. We're the company's secret weapon." Julian's smile was slow, devastating. "That's the best idea you've ever had." They worked through the night, debating, building, creating something neither could have made alone. And when the sun rose over Manhattan, painting their office in gold, Elara looked at Julian, rumpled and brilliant in hers, and thought, this is what falling looks like. Not perfect, not safe, but absolutely terrifyingly worth it. Victoria walked in at 7 a.m., stopped short at the sight of them together, surrounded by coffee cups and sketches and the physical evidence of collaboration. "What's this?" she asked. "The Anderson fix," Elara said. "And a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" Julian stood. The kind where you make us co-leads on major accounts, where strategy and creative work together from day one instead of fighting for territory, where we prove that the best work comes from partnership. Victoria looked between them. Her expression was unreadable. Then she smiled. About damn time. I've been waiting 2 years for you two to figure this out. You knew? Elara blinked. Of course I knew. I've been trying to force collaboration for months. Guess it took Switzerland to make it happen. Victoria picked up their proposal, scanned it. This is good, really good. We'll implement immediately. But, she paused, if you're going to work together, we need to address the relationship issue. Elara's heart stopped. Relationship? Don't insult my intelligence. You think I haven't noticed the way you look at each other? The way you've been looking at each other since you got back? Victoria's smile turned knowing. HR will need disclosure forms, but I don't care who you date as long as you do your jobs. And based on this, she tapped the proposal, you're doing them better than ever. After Victoria left, Elara and Julian stared at each other. Did that just happen? Elara asked. I think we just got permission to be happy. That's terrifying. Most good things are. Julian pulled her close. Still terrified? Absolutely. Good, me too. Let's be terrified together. He kissed her as morning light filled the office, and Elara thought, maybe love wasn't about conquering fear. Maybe it was about finding someone worth being scared with. Outside, the city woke up. Traffic sounds, sirens, life continuing in all its messy complexity. But in that office, with Julian's arms around her and possibility stretching ahead like uncharted territory, Elara finally understood what it meant to take a leap and fly. Monday morning felt like walking back into a battlefield wearing the wrong uniform. Elara stood in front of her closet, staring at rows of neutral suits and structured dresses, the armor she'd worn for years. Today they felt wrong, too stiff, too defensive, like she was preparing for war when what she wanted was peace. She chose navy, softer than black, paired it with the silk blouse Julian had once complimented without realizing she'd remember. Small rebellion, tiny declaration. Her reflection stared back. Same woman, different eyes. Switzerland had changed something fundamental. Or maybe it had just revealed what was always there, buried under layers of professional distance and self-protection. Her phone buzzed. Julian, coffee before the chaos? Her lips curved. Our usual spot, 15 minutes. Our usual spot. They had a usual spot now. When had that happened? Somewhere between Switzerland and Sunday's all-nighter, they'd accumulated routines, shorthand, the small intimacies that turned two people into an us. The coffee shop was crowded with Monday morning warriors. Elara spotted Julian immediately. He'd claimed their corner table, 2 cups already waiting. He looked up as she approached, and his smile did things to her cardiovascular system that no amount of strategic thinking could prevent. You wore the blue, he said as she sat. You noticed. I always notice. He slid her coffee across. Perfect temperature, exactly the right amount of cream. Ready for this? No, you? Absolutely not, but we're doing it anyway. They were, together. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the only solid thing in a world that had shifted on its axis. At the office, people stared. Of course they stared. Elara Vance and Julian Thorne arriving together, laughing about something, moving like planets in orbit around each other. The rumor mill would be working overtime by noon. Let them talk, Elara thought. Let them wonder. For once, she didn't care about optics or perception or any of the 1,000 calculations she usually performed before making any decision. She cared about the man walking beside her, the man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her anyway. In the elevator, surrounded by colleagues studiously avoiding eye contact, Julian's pinky finger hooked around hers, invisible to everyone else, obvious as a spotlight to her. Your floor or mine, he murmured. Yours. We should brief your team on the Anderson fix before the client call at 10. Look at you, already thinking like a partnership. Don't get used to it, but his smile said he already was. The creative team's reaction to Elara's presence in their morning meeting ranged from confused to hostile. She didn't blame them. Strategy showing up on creative's turf usually meant criticism, budget cuts, or both. Why is she here? Marcus, Julian's lead designer, didn't bother lowering his voice. Julian stood at the head of the conference table. Because we're changing how we work. From now on, strategy and creative collaborate from day one. No more silos, no more territorial bullshit. We're one team. Since when? Sarah, the copywriter, crossed her arms. Since I got tired of watching great ideas die because we couldn't execute them properly. Since I realized that Elara's strategic framework makes our creative work stronger, not weaker. Julian gestured to the screen where Elara had pulled up the Anderson fix. Look at this. Really look. We screwed up Anderson because we prioritized aesthetics over audience. The campaign was beautiful. It was also completely wrong for the target demographic. Silence. Uncomfortable shifting. Elara caught it, Julian continued. She could have thrown us under the bus. Instead, she worked with me all night to fix it. To save not just the account, but our reputation, our jobs, because that's what partners do. Marcus's expression softened fractionally. Partners. Partners, Julian confirmed. He looked at Elara. You want to walk them through it? Every instinct screamed to decline, to let Julian handle his team, to stay in her lane. Instead, she stood. The original campaign was targeting venture capitalists. You went cutting edge, disruptive, very Silicon Valley. She clicked to the next slide. But Anderson's actual clients are family-owned manufacturing businesses, third, fourth generation. They don't want disruption. They want trust, stability, legacy. So we failed, Sarah said flatly. You missed the brief, Elara corrected. There's a difference. Missing the brief is fixable. Failing is permanent. She pulled up their revised concept. Julian and I reworked this to honor both. It's still visually striking. All your original design elements are there. But we've repositioned the narrative. Instead of disrupt the industry, it's build on tradition. Instead of looking forward only, we're connecting past to future. Marcus leaned forward. That's actually brilliant. It's what happens when creative vision meets strategic insight, Julian said. When we stop fighting and start collaborating. The meeting continued, smoother. Questions became genuine instead of defensive. By the end, Elara had a list of action items and something she hadn't had in 2 years. Respect from creative. In the hallway afterward, Julian caught her hand, pulled her into an empty conference room. That was incredible, he said. It was terrifying. You were born for this, leading, inspiring, making people believe in something bigger than themselves. I was making them believe in a campaign. You were making them believe in us. Julian's hands framed her face. Did you see their faces at the end? They got it. They see what we see, that together we're unstoppable. Elara wanted to kiss him, wanted to pull him close and forget about meetings and clients and all the reasons this was still complicated. Instead, the door opened. Victoria stood in the doorway, eyebrow raised. My office, both of you, now. Victoria's office smelled like expensive leather and power. She gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Elara and Julian sat. The distance between them felt suddenly vast. The Anderson client just called, Victoria said without preamble. They've seen the revised campaign. Elara's stomach dropped. Too soon. They'd barely had time to present it to the team, let alone refine it for. They love it. Victoria's smile was sharp. They're not just staying. They're doubling the contract, want us to handle their entire portfolio rebrand. The relief was dizzying. Julian's hand found Elara's under the desk. squeezed once. That's excellent news, Elara managed. It's more than excellent. It's proof of concept. Victoria leaned back. I'm restructuring the department. You two are now co-leads on all major accounts, strategy and creative as equal partners. You'll report directly to me. Your teams will integrate. And before you ask, yes, this comes with significant raises and equity. It was everything Elara had worked for. Partnership, recognition, power. So why did it feel like a trap? What's the catch? Julian asked. No catch, just expectations. You two need to be the model. If this integration fails, if you can't prove that collaboration produces better results than competition, the entire structure collapses. I'm betting the company's future on this working, on you working. The weight of that settled like concrete. We won't let you down, Elara said. After they left Victoria's office, Julian pulled her into an empty stairwell. We just got handed the keys to the kingdom. We just got handed a timer bomb. If we fail, we won't fail. You don't know that. I know us. I know what we can do when we stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other. His hands found her waist. I know that I love you, and that's not going away just because the stakes got higher. Elara's breath caught. You love me. I love you, have for a while now, probably since that gallery opening, definitely since Switzerland, and I'm going to keep loving you through every meeting and deadline and crisis that comes our way. That's not, we can't, words failed, because what she wanted to say was too big, too terrifying, too true. You don't have to say it back, Julian said gently. Not until you're ready. I just needed you to know. But she was ready. Had been ready since the cabin, since the storm, since the moment he'd looked at her and seen not a competitor, but a partner. I love you too, she whispered, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever admitted. Julian's kiss tasted like victory and promise, and all the futures they hadn't written yet. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elara rested her forehead against his. We're really doing this, she said. Every bit of it, the job, the relationship, the terrifying leap into something that might be the best thing that ever happened to us. Or the worst. I'm betting on best. For the first time in her carefully calculated life, so was she. The scarf appeared on her desk like a ghost from another timeline. Elara stared at it. Charcoal cashmere, expensive, unmistakably Julian's. He'd worn it in Switzerland, left it in their suite. She'd packed it by mistake, meaning to return it, then forgotten in the chaos of Anderson and restructuring and everything that came after. She picked it up. It still smelled like him, like pine and expensive cologne, and all the moments they'd shared when the world was just snow and possibility. A note was tucked into the folds. Found this in my closet. Pretty sure it's yours now. Like my heart. J. Elara's throat tightened. She traced the fabric, remembering cold mornings in shared warmth, and the feeling of his arms around her while the world froze outside. Her office suddenly felt too small, too corporate, too far from mountains and storms and truth. She grabbed her coat and the scarf and headed for Julian's office. He was on a call, gestured for her to wait. She shook her head, wrapped the scarf around his neck, and kissed him in full view of anyone who might walk past his glass-walled office. When she pulled back, Julian's eyes were wide. What was that for? For reminding me what matters, for being you, for, she swallowed, for loving me even when I make it difficult. You don't make it difficult. I make everything difficult. It's kind of my thing. Then I guess I love difficult things. He tugged her closer by the scarf. Stay, have lunch with me, in the middle of a Monday, like normal people who are in love and don't care who knows it. I have a budget meeting at 1. Cancel it. I can't just cancel. You're a partner now. You can do whatever you want. So I'm asking, what do you want? The question hung there, deceptively simple, impossibly complex. What did she want? For years, the answer had been clear: success, recognition, power, security, the things you could quantify and control, the things that couldn't abandon you or break your heart or prove that vulnerability was a mistake. Now? Now she wanted something terrifying. She wanted Monday lunches with Julian, wanted to wrap scarves around his neck and kiss him in front of glass walls, wanted to choose happiness over safety, love over control, us over I. "I want lunch," she said, "with you, right now." Julian's smile could have lit the entire building. "Best decision you've made all week." It's Monday. Exactly, setting a high bar early. They ate Thai food from containers at his desk, knees bumping under the table, arguing about everything and nothing. And Elara thought, this is what life could be. Not perfect, not always easy, but real, honest, hers. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. "Budget meeting moved to tomorrow per your request." She hadn't requested that. Julian's grin was unrepentant. "I may have had my assistant coordinate with yours. You rescheduled my meeting without asking? I'm a man who knows what he wants, and what I want is more time with you. Sue me." Elara should have been annoyed, should have reminded him about boundaries and professional behavior and all the rules she'd built her life around. Instead, she laughed, actually laughed, and reached across the desk to steal his spring roll. "You're terrible," she said. "You love it." She did. God help her, she really did. The call came at 4 in the afternoon. Elara was mid-presentation to the marketing team when her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She ignored it. Then Julian's phone started too. Then Victoria's assistant appeared in the doorway with an expression that meant, "Crisis. We need you both. Conference room, now." The conference room was already full. Victoria, legal, PR, faces that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Sit," Victoria said. They sat. "Meyer Holdings just called. Friedrich Meyer is in the hospital. Heart attack. Serious." Victoria's voice was clipped, professional. "Greta's taken over operations temporarily. She wants to meet with us. Tomorrow, in Zurich." Elara's first thought was for Friedrich, the kind man who'd talked about his wife, who'd believed in love as business strategy, who'd given them a contract based on faith in partnership. Her second thought was colder, the contract, the integration. Everything they'd built in the last week depended on Meyer's faith in them. If Greta wanted to renegotiate or pull out, "She specifically requested you to," Victoria continued. "Said she needs to discuss the contract in person, with the people her father trusted." The implication was clear. This wasn't a renegotiation. This was a test. "We'll go," Julian said immediately. "Flights are booked. You leave tonight. Fix this." Victoria's gaze was steel. "Whatever it takes. We can't lose Meyer." The flight to Zurich was nothing like Switzerland. No champagne, no playful arguments, just silence heavy with worry and the weight of everything they stood to lose. Elara stared out the window at clouds rendered gray by darkness. Beside her, Julian worked on his tablet, but she could tell his focus was fractured. They hadn't talked about what this meant, hadn't discussed strategy or contingencies, or any of the things she usually built her confidence on. "What if she cancels?" Elara said quietly. Julian looked up. "She won't. You don't know that. I know that Friedrich believed in us, in what we represent. His daughter will honor that. Unless she thinks we lied, unless she sees us as frauds who manipulated her father for a contract." Julian's hand covered hers. "We didn't lie about the important things. We love each other. We're partners. That was real, is real. But we started as fake, and we became real. That's not fraud. That's..." He struggled for words. "That's transformation. And if Greta can't see that, if she wants to pull the contract because we fell in love while pretending to be in love, then maybe we're better off without clients who can't appreciate the complexity of what we've built. Elara wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that honesty would be enough, but she'd spent her career learning that honesty was a luxury people in power rarely rewarded. The hospital in Zurich was brutally modern, all glass and sharp angles. They found Greta in a private waiting room, looking exhausted but composed. She stood when they entered. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course," Elara said. "How is your father?" "Stable. The doctors are optimistic, but it was close." Greta gestured for them to sit. "He wants to see you, both of you, before we discuss business." Friedrich's room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, older, but his eyes, when they opened, held the same sharp awareness. "Ah, my favorite couple." His voice was weak but warm. "Don't talk," Greta said gently. "Save your strength." "Nonsense. I'm old, not dead." Friedrich's gaze moved between Elara and Julian. "You came. That says something. You didn't have to." "Yes, we did," Julian said. "You gave us a chance when you barely knew us. You believed in us." "I believed in love, in partnership, in the kind of connection that makes everything else possible." Friedrich's hand moved, gesturing them closer. "I was right, yes? You too. Real thing?" Elara felt Julian's hand find hers. Squeeze gently. She looked at Friedrich, this man who'd seen through their performance to something true they hadn't even recognized yet. "Yes," she said. "Real." "Good, very good." Friedrich smiled. "Love makes good business. I told my Margot that." She laughed at me, but she understood. When you love someone, you want them to succeed. You work harder, smarter, together. His eyes drifted closed. Together is everything. Greta ushered them out as Friedrich dozed. In the hallway, she turned to face them. "The contract stands. We're moving forward with everything exactly as discussed." Relief rushed through Elara like oxygen after drowning. "But," Greta continued, "I need to ask you something, and I need the truth." Here it was, the moment where everything unraveled. "In Switzerland," Greta said carefully, "were you two really engaged? Or was that a performance?" The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. Julian looked at Elara. Elara looked at Julian, and in that moment she made a choice. Not the strategic choice, not the safe choice, the honest one. "We weren't engaged," she admitted. "We weren't even dating. We were colleagues who didn't particularly like each other. Your father's requirements put us in an impossible position, so we pretended." Greta's expression was unreadable. "But," Elara continued, "somewhere in the pretending, it became real. We fell in love, actually fell in love, and now we're together, not for the contract, not for appearances, just because we want to be." The silence stretched, excruciating. Then Greta laughed, actually laughed. "I know." "You know?" Julian blinked. "I suspected from the beginning. The way you looked at each other, like you were constantly surprised by your own feelings. That's not how established couples look. That's how people look when they're falling in love and don't quite know what to do about it." Greta's smile turned fond. "My father knew too. He saw it. That's why he was so invested. He wasn't looking for a couple. He was looking for people brave enough to become one." Elara felt like the floor had disappeared. So this was all a test, perhaps, or maybe just an old romantic seeing an opportunity to create the kind of love story he'd experienced himself. Greta touched Elara's arm gently. "The contract is real. Your partnership is real. And what you've built, both personally and professionally, that's real too. That's all that matters." Back in New York, life became a controlled chaos of integration meetings, team restructuring, and the thousand small battles that came with changing how an entire company worked. Elara and Julian were brilliant together. Everyone could see it. The results were undeniable. Projects that would have taken months now took weeks. Creative and strategy moved like synchronized dancers instead of warring factions. But success came with scrutiny. The whispers started quietly. Water cooler conversations that stopped when Elara entered. Side eyes in meetings. The question no one asked directly, but everyone wondered, were they really that good? Or were they just sleeping their way to the top together? Marcus brought it up first. Cornered Elara in the break room with surprising directness. People are talking, he said, about you and Julian, about whether the partnership is legitimate or just personal. Elara's spine stiffened. Our results speak for themselves. Do they? Or does Victoria favor you because you're a couple? Because that's what people are saying, that you're getting preferential treatment, that the rest of us don't have a chance because we're not fucking the competition. The crude language was designed to provoke. It worked. My relationship with Julian is none of your business, Elara said coldly. But since you brought it up, we're not getting special treatment. We're getting results. The Anderson account? That was work. Real work. All night. The Meyer contract? That was strategy and execution. And yes, personal connection. Because that's how business works. People work with people they trust. We earn that trust. By lying about being engaged? So that rumor had spread too. Of course it had. We earned it, Elara repeated, by doing our jobs better than anyone else could, by proving that collaboration beats competition, by showing up. And if you have a problem with that, take it up with Victoria. Or better yet, take a look at your own results and ask yourself if you're bitter because we're successful or because you're not. She left before Marcus could respond, found Julian in his office looking equally frustrated. Let me guess, he said. Someone implied we're only successful because we're sleeping together. Sarah? Marcus. Same conversation, different person. Elara sank into his couch. I knew this would happen. The second we went public, we became targets. We're not targets, we're pioneers. Of course there's resistance. People hate change, especially when it shows them their own limitations. This isn't just about change. It's about us, about whether we can be taken seriously as professionals when everyone knows we're, she gestured helplessly, together, in love, building something real. Julian crossed to sit beside her. I'm not going to apologize for loving you, or for working with you, or for the fact that we're better together than apart. If people can't see that, that's their problem, not ours. Easy for you to say. You've always been confident. You've never had to. She stopped. Had to what? Had to prove I deserve to be here. You're a man, creative, allowed to be brilliant and temperamental and unconventional. I'm a woman in strategy. I've spent my entire career being twice as good to get half the credit. And now I'm in a relationship with my professional partner, and suddenly everything I built is suspect. Julian was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I didn't think about that. About how this affects you differently than it affects me. I'm not blaming you. You should. I should have asked. Should have considered the optics from your perspective instead of assuming we could just logic our way through institutional sexism. He took her hands. So tell me, what do you need? Do we go more public? Less public? Do we separate professionally? What makes this work for you? The fact that he asked, really asked, instead of assuming he knew best, meant everything. I don't want to separate professionally. That would feel like admitting we can't handle it, like proving everyone right. Elara thought about it. I want to be so undeniably good that no one can question it. I want our results to be the only story anyone tells. Then that's what we'll do. We work harder. We deliver better. We make it impossible for anyone to see us as anything other than the best partnership this company has ever had. That's a lot of pressure. Good. We do our best work under pressure. Julian kissed her forehead. We've got this. Together. Together, Elara echoed and tried to believe it. 6 months later, Elara stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at a positive pregnancy test. No, no, this wasn't. They'd been careful. They'd planned nothing. Her entire life was about plans, and this was decidedly not. Elara? Julian's voice from the bedroom. You okay in there? She opened the door, handed him the test without words. His eyes went wide. Is this? Positive, yes. I don't know how. We were careful. Careful isn't perfect. Julian set the test down, looked at her. How do you feel? That was the question, wasn't it? How did she feel? Terrified, obviously. Her career was finally stable. The integration was working. She and Julian had just been promoted again. Everything was perfectly balanced, and a baby would destroy that balance completely. But underneath the terror was something else. Something warm and unexpected and impossible to ignore. I don't know, she admitted. I'm scared. This isn't the plan. We're not married. We've only been together officially for 6 months. We're in the middle of the biggest career opportunity of our lives. And her voice cracked. I don't know if I can do this. Any of this. Julian pulled her close. You don't have to decide right now. Whatever you want, whatever you need, I'm here. We figure it out together. What do you want? Honestly? He pulled back to look at her. I'm terrified too. I never thought about kids, never planned for them. But the idea of a little person who's half you and half me, he laughed shakily, that's the most beautiful, terrifying thing I've ever imagined. Elara's hand went to her stomach, still flat, still unchanged, but different now. Possibility and potential in all the futures she hadn't considered. I can't have a baby and run a department, she said. It's not possible. The hours alone. Says who? Plenty of people manage careers and families. Not women at this level. Not without sacrificing something. Career or motherhood. You don't get both. That's bullshit, and you know it. Julian's voice was firm. You're Elara Vance. You rewrite rules for a living. If anyone can figure out how to do both, it's you. And you won't be doing it alone. I'm here. Fully here. Whatever that looks like. You say that now. I'll say it every day for the rest of our lives if that's what you need to hear. He kissed her softly. I love you. I want this life with you. Kids, chaos, career, all of it. But only if you want it too. This is your choice, your body, your life. I'll support whatever you decide. Elara looked at him. This man who'd gone from enemy to partner to love in less than a year. Who'd shown her that vulnerability wasn't weakness. That letting someone in didn't mean losing yourself. I'm going to need help, she said quietly. You'll have it. And we're going to have to restructure everything. Childcare, schedules, expectations. We'll figure it out. I'm serious, Julian. This changes everything. I know, that's what makes it perfect. She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways this was impossible. Instead, she kissed him and let herself imagine a future that included more than just success. A future that included love and partnership and maybe, just maybe, a family. 1 year later, a Thursday, nothing special except that it was. Elara stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows in the new office, bigger now, corner suite, Victoria's old office after Victoria had been promoted to CEO of the parent company. The city sprawled below. From up here, everything looked manageable, contained. She placed a hand on her stomach, 6 months now, visibly pregnant, undeniably present. The baby kicked, strong, insistent, claiming space the way Elara had claimed hers in this building. Behind her, the door opened. Julian, carrying coffee, and that expression he got when he was plotting something. I have a surprise, he said. I hate surprises. You love mine. He set down the coffee and pulled a small box from his pocket. Elara's breath caught. Julian, before you panic, it's not a ring. Well, it is, but not. He opened the box. Inside, 2 simple bands. Platinum, elegant, timeless. I know we said we'd wait until after the baby, until things settled, until we had time to plan a wedding. But I'm tired of waiting, tired of introducing you as my partner when you're so much more than that. We are partners. We're everything. Partners, parents, best friends, the person I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life. Julian took her hands. So I'm asking, not with grand gestures or public proposals, just us, just this Thursday. Will you marry me? Elara looked at the rings, at Julian, at the life they'd built from fake beginnings and real feelings, at the future growing inside her, in the city stretching below, and all the impossible things they'd made possible. A Tuesday proposal would have been more on brand, she said. We can wait until Tuesday. No. Elara took the rings, slid one onto his finger, let him slide the other onto hers. Thursday is perfect. Everything is perfect. Her voice caught. You're the best thing I never planned for. The variable I couldn't predict. The risk that paid off. Is that a yes? That's a yes. To all of it. The marriage, the baby, the beautiful, complicated mess we're building together. Julian kissed her. Soft, sweet, full of promise. Outside the city hummed. Inside their baby kicked. And Elara thought, this is what happiness feels like. Not perfect, not simple, not anything she could have strategized or planned or controlled. Just real, just love, just them. 2 years ago, she'd walked into a Swiss resort pretending to be in love with her enemy. Now she stood in a New York office, married to her partner, building a family and a future she never knew she wanted. Life, it turned out, had better plans than any strategy she could have designed. And for once, she was happy to follow instead of lead, to trust instead of control, to leap instead of calculate. Because Julian had taught her the most important lesson. Some things you couldn't plan for, you could only show up for them and choose them again and again, every single day. Epilogue. The nursery smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Julian was assembling a crib with the kind of intense focus he usually reserved for campaign pitches. Elara supervised from the rocking chair Victoria had sent as a gift. Left side, other left. I know which way is left. Apparently not, because that piece goes there. Yes, like that. Julian looked up, grinning. You're enjoying this? Immensely. It's not often I get to tell you what to do. You tell me what to do every day, and you ignore me every day. But right now, you have to listen. Furniture assembly is strategy, not creative. Everything is creative if you do it right, says the man who just tried to force a square peg into a round hole. They worked in comfortable silence. Outside, the city prepared for evening. Inside, they prepared for everything else. Nervous? Julian asked. Terrified. Good nervous or bad nervous? Both. All of it. Elara's hand went to her stomach. What if we screw this up? We will, guaranteed. Nobody gets parenting right. You just do your best and hope the therapy bills aren't too catastrophic. Julian crossed to her, knelt in front of the rocking chair. But we'll screw it up together, and we'll figure it out together, just like we figured out everything else. This is bigger than a campaign. This is the biggest campaign we'll ever run, and we're going to be amazing at it. He kissed her stomach. Because we're amazing at everything, especially the terrifying impossible things. Elara's hand found his hair. I love you, even when you're impossibly optimistic. I love you too, even when you're catastrophizing our hypothetical future parenting failures. Someone has to. And someone has to believe we'll be fine. That's why we work. Balance. The crib stood finished, empty but waiting, full of possibility, just like them, just like everything they'd built from nothing, from fake to real, from enemies to partners to family, from Switzerland to here. The end.